GM, and welcome to yet another episode of the Solfate podcast,
GM.
where we chat with builders and founders in the Solana ecosystem. This was a bit of a departure for us today, this episode.
Just a teeny bit.
We've not really spoken with many artists before, have we?
We have not. So like this, we had Graffito on, who is personally like one of my favorite artists in the Solana ecosystem, or like any blockchain ecosystem. Probably her and DJ and Poet are like my top two favorite artists, and
hard not to love them.
Not only is Graffito's artwork amazing, but it's almost all, if not all, completely AI generated, which, like, you know, people say is like, oh, I generate AI art and stuff, and they're using like ChatGPT and Midjourney and like these like pre-built AI platforms where you just like give it your prompt and go. Jackie does not do that.
Jackie's in the trenches.
She does not do that. She's in the trenches going through figuring out how to like set up her own models and doing all these like really crazy, basically AI art experiments, including like animations and videos and things. And so cool.
I was going to say, if you actually look at her art, I think it's abundantly clear that like the AI art she's doing is not the AI art that like your random buddy is producing on Midjourney. That's not to fade Midjourney at all, but it's just like, it's very clear, at least to those who are sort of technical and have any idea of how this is working, that she's like on the cutting edge here, that there's so much time and effort and work that goes into her doing this. And like, this was wild to me, but she like has a background in basically cybersecurity. So she's like extremely technical, and she's doing things that you can't do if you're not extremely technical. Like she's such this cool eclectic mix of like technical and artistic, and it's so awesome. I left that episode like, damn, I need to be more creative. Like, I need to find some creative outlets in my life.
Yeah, she is so great. And like, one of my favorite things is her background and like how she got to where she is now. She talks about her entire background, which like I come from an obscure background in the crypto world. Most people do, but like every so often you find like a new person that has just like a really dramatic background. And she definitely has a dramatic background of how she got to where she is today in crypto, and also not in crypto. Like she has kind of in both camps. Yeah, Jackie is hands down probably my favorite person in the Solana ecosystem right now.
I was about to say she definitely she probably took that title for me. That episode, it's like, oh man. But hey, let's dig in. Obviously, we want to shout out Phantom before we start. We love partnering with Phantom. They're the preferred wallet of the Solfate ecosystem. I also want to just give a shout out to my dev shop Unboxed. If you're looking to build anything, you know, whether it be Solana or not Solana related, reach out to us. We're here to help. But with that, let's dig into the episode.
Let's go. Nothing in this podcast is or should be considered financial advice. Any opinions and thoughts expressed are solely those of the individual. They do not represent the opinions of any entity. Enjoy.
You can say Graffito, also known as Jackie Singh. I'm a cybersecurity professional. I'm a writer. I have a Substack, and I'm very well known for threat research and not so much for my art, because the stuff that I do over on the threat research side and the cybersecurity side of things is really unlinked from art. And I think the audience that I have there is totally disconnected from artistic pursuits overall, you know? So it's just a totally different world. And then they hate NFTs. I've tried. I actually created a Discord and tried to bring a bunch of like Web 2 friends over to Web 3. And I was like, hey, let's check out crypto. Let's learn about coins. You know, let's kind of build a community where we can share about this stuff as people who don't know very much about it. Me being one of the people who knew more about it and trying to kind of herd the cats. It just didn't work very well, guys. It didn't work very well.
Specifically with like security researchers and like that type of like DEF CON type of person? They were just like, NFTs are the worst.
Yeah. So I have that has been my primary community for many years. Over the last few, since I worked for the Biden campaign in 2020, I was hired there to work as an incident response and threat response type of person, threat detection type of person. And ever since I did that, I think my focus in life changed, and I was thinking about my career and the roles that I was taking a little bit differently. And so Drip fit perfectly into that, because I was not only working really hard on art, but not finding opportunities for distribution and not finding a way for people to see what I'm making, but also finding that really unfulfilling, not having the ability to connect with whoever my end users are, whoever the viewers or experiencers are of my art, and not being able to connect with those people is really tough for me, and that's the reflects the lack of social feature integration on other platforms, right? On other NFT marketplaces that have not been so creator focused, not artist focused, but more thinking about building a marketplace and understanding what the needs are of the people who are buying, right? So not so much attention on the supply side, right? A lot of attention on the buy side. And so the product at Drip is, in my opinion, revolutionary. I think it changes a lot of the equation in a way that hasn't been done even in Web 2. And I think once you're able to abstract some of the parts of this, which I think Vibhu and team have done brilliantly, like with droplets, for example, right? The sense that you can go onto the platform and purchase droplets in a form and fashion that feels similar to what you would do if you were on Roblox or, like any other gaming platform where you're
Weird.
converting.
If only he would have worked at Roblox before. And
yeah, why did I say Roblox? I think he might have gotten let go from Roblox for doing a naughty. So
he did. Vibhu was actually our very first guest we had on the show. It was right around Solana Spaces shutting down, and he gave his entire backstory and like talked about him getting him working at Roblox and then no longer working there.
Yeah. I think that his story is very similar to those of like myself and people that I grew up with, which is the sense that you don't always want to color inside the lines and you want to push boundaries and figure out how to do things differently. And sometimes that gets you in trouble. If you're in these very bureaucratic, regulated environments where it's not about moving fast and breaking things, it's about kind of a slow and steady and making sure that everyone knows what's going on and has buy-in. Yeah, it can be a really difficult kind of environment. So I think that Vibhu is exactly where he's supposed to be, in a place where he can iterate very quickly, receive feedback from his user community in a very direct way on a regular basis. I think all of that has been instrumental to pushing Drip forward to where it is today.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You like briefly touched on your background, but I feel like I was left reeling a little bit by how many things you threw in there.
You listed off a lot of things. I was like, oh wow, this is all right, let's go.
As much as I want this to be forward looking, I have to say, like, let's rewind a few years and talk a little bit about like security, like cybersecurity, threat researcher, worked for the Biden campaign. You're talking about your other account and then getting into art and Web3. It's just like there's a lot there. So maybe we like roll back the clock a few years and sort of talk from like early in your career and then how you got to now, if that's okay, even if it's only for me.
Yeah, no, of course. So early in my career, I started out in the 2600 hacker community. This is a organization that is a nonprofit that puts out a magazine 4 times a year, the Hackers Quarterly. And this was the kind of magazine where you could find, I'm smiling, the corners of my lips are curling up, because it's the kind of place where you can find, as a 13 and 14-year-olds, very exciting. How do I get something free out of a vending machine? How do I exploit a vulnerability, for example, in a vending machine to get it to pop something out that it wasn't supposed to, or that it didn't want to do so in the first place? And so the ideology behind, I want to push the boundaries, I want to do something different, I want to take technology into a direction that it hasn't been taken in before, that's very much the ethos that I grew up in. And it was a very anti-authoritarian, like communist on some ends, anarchist on other ends, like just a very kind of political collective full of people with a lot of different ideas, and a lot of them were kids. And so we would get together once a month at like a mall at the food court, and we would talk about all of our latest hacker techniques and all the cool things that we had learned, and how I could
love it,
just like script the search for default creds for like Cisco routers, for example, so that I could then use them to proxy around and do other stuff, right? It's just really silly stuff that as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 14-year-old, super, super exciting. I was the young girl at the Linux users groups. I would go with my friend Eric. We were both like 14 or something. We laugh about this. And we would hang out. And we would listen, and we'd be around a lot of like older men who were like really confused about our presence there, but tolerated us anyway. And so through these informal meetups, through just learning about Linux and like falling in love with Linux and like realizing I could do all kinds of really cool stuff. I could build a router, out of 486 that I found in the trash, or Pentium 1 that I found in the trash. There were so many interesting things that I could do to repurpose technology, to do things I wasn't supposed to do. And that gave me like a sense of power, as a child. That really was important for me and valuable, because it gave me a sense that I could create my own reality and that there was a place for me, right? Like I can learn enough tech to go really far. And that learning has served me quite a bit over my life, because I went from dropping out of high school the day after I turned 16, because all I wanted to do was hang out at the Hacker Halfway House in Brooklyn. And then I joined the military when I was 17. I shipped off to Iraq. I came back and I was persona non grata in all of those collectives full of people who have they're just like, oh man, she's on the other side.
She
now.
works for the man.
Yeah. And, realistically, I did. When I joined the military, I was working on tanks. So my job description was to work on Bradleys and Abrams and Paladins, which are big artillery machines, the hydraulics, the electronics, the electrical systems. And I deployed to Iraq. And after I got back from Iraq, I decided I would get out of the military and go back over as a contractor, because working for the Defense Department as a contractor meant that I could leave anytime I wanted.
You also get paid way
absolutely. I had a great tax break if you're outside of the United States for more than a certain amount of time every year, right? You get this big fat tax break. And so for me, I was in heaven. I had a great time. I was learning from people who were much older than I, and I was working on things that were really technical. And like the OJT was incredible. Really valuable time in my life. And I transitioned from working on military vehicles and tanks and guns, like weapons, over to IT. And so the first job that I had in IT in Iraq was working for a guy who had been embedded in my unit. He was working for Raytheon back in the day. He hired me on, and the job was to travel to all of the little bases in Iraq and fix the military morale, welfare, and recreation systems. So the satellite dishes like Starlink were deployed at every base, and they needed their Starlink to be properly pointed and oriented, and there'd be a dust storm and cause a problem. Any kind of shift in the positioning would be a problem. So I did that for about 7 months. And then I started really working on like way cooler stuff, like just systems engineering. I worked on a project called Tiger that was fascinating, which is like a precursor to Google Maps. And like aggregating information from troops on the ground in Iraq. So if you wanted to get a sense of, if we met up with Muhammad in a village, did he have some sense of what was happening in that village? Did he have advice for us as the sheikh if we built a well? What would be the impact of that? So I worked on projects like that, where there were anthropologists and social scientists coming into the danger zone, into the war zone, and their job was to help make things better, to economically revitalize Iraq. Worked on Pentagon projects, lots of cool stuff, but all very IT focused. And I eventually transitioned into a cybersecurity role in 2012 when I worked in the Horn of Africa. I left Iraq, went to a small country called Djibouti, which is right around the movie Captain Phillips, where he's like, "This is my ship now. Look at me," right? Yes. Like, the Strait of Aden. So after I did all of that, I came back to the United States. I found myself kind of feeling disenchanted with living in a McMansion and looking outside and seeing just like abject poverty, just terrifying poverty of the level that an American like us that can't. I don't know if you guys are Americans. I assume.
Yes.
Yeah. If you were born in America, you just can't even fathom like what kind of poverty that is. And so it was really jarring to be in a house with like marble floors and stuff, just like the regular kind of gated community where all the contractors that were American or from Western countries were. And then, to see that outside the gate. And so I didn't last very long there. I made it about, again, 6-7 months or so. Very difficult place to be. And I came back to the States and I started working for a company called Mandiant. And Mandiant is now part of Google. They were bought by Google a couple of years ago at this point. So I think it's been a couple of years, maybe a year and a half. And I had amazing opportunities to do management consulting for the Fortune 500 or the global Fortune 1000, right? So very large companies who are either having the worst day of their lives where their hair's on fire, they have a super bad cybersecurity incident, and they really need to bring in an outside consultancy to help them resolve that. That was some of the work that we did. And my specialty in particular is threat detection. So if you wanted to get a sense of what was happening inside a company, from a ground truth perspective, instead of just like, hey, we're having some meetings with consultants and they're telling us that we've implemented all of these security controls and that they're functioning. What you do is you take a bunch of sensors and you deploy them out into that environment. So metadata from your Cisco routers, right? NetFlow data from your Cisco routers, for example. Your any data that goes into your security information event management tool, your SIEM tool. So think of logs, right? Every single thing that you do in the enterprise generates a log. So when we put all of those together, we're able to create a single pane of glass and then make some inferences about the traffic that we're seeing. So for example, if we're not supposed to have Firefox deployed in the organization, but we see that there's a user agent string that is a Firefox user agent string, we might have a problem, right? Where's the breakdown? And that goes all the way back down to the controls that the organization has established and how they've implemented them and how they've validated those controls exist. Now imagine this, but for every layer of technology that a company has. And then on top of that, the cybersecurity processes that overlay on top of that are part of the methodology that make it all work. So I became pretty proficient at understanding how a security operations center works and how to build that and operationalize that with a team of people and how to do that for a company globally at scale. So really exciting and interesting work. But at the end of the day, after having worked at so many of these companies and seen all of the things that they're doing internally and kind of getting a sense of what all of their dirty laundry is across many different industries, I got the sense that the problems are very repetitive. You know, the problem set is fairly similar in different organizations. And so you have to have the patience to want to go in and have the same conversation again and again. And sometimes when you look like me, it might not really get through. You know, it might be like, well, she says there's a problem, but I'm not quite sure if it's something that I need to take action on. I'm not sure if I trust it. Do you know what I mean? And so even with a team, I felt that once I shifted from being an individual contributor to being a leader, I left Mandiant after almost 4 years and went to Intel, where I became director of incident response, global director of incident response at Intel. And then went to McAfee because Intel was McAfee was spun back out of Intel Corporation. So having gone through that and then gone to Accenture and worked in management consulting there, I can say that I've seen a lot of businesses and I've seen a lot of consultancies and I've seen how they work. And I had the crazy idea that I was going to improve on this. And so myself and Banana started a business called Spyglass Security years ago, back in 2018. And one of the really interesting things that we built there was a detection tool called Data Drifter. We actually had NBC write a story about it. And this tool was indexing buckets. So like S3 buckets, Azure buckets, right? Like GCP buckets. They're open. They have data. What kind of data is it? And then how do we even make sense of that as a cybersecurity researcher? Like, let's say you find a bucket and it's just available, it's open, right? There's a ton of data in it. How do you get a sense of how dangerous is this data? How is it dangerous? Is it toxic? Is it, does it contain PII? Are these passport scans? Are these private photos? What app did they come from? Right? Very difficult to ascertain that. And so Banana's genius was to build these different kind of portals into the app in which you could, for example, let's say you have a bucket full of video content. How do you get a sense of what that video content is? Unless it's named very descriptively, it's going to be really hard for you to sample all of those videos to get that quick sense of what it is from a research standpoint. So he built like a TV interface where you could just click, you're in the bucket, and then you just click next, 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 and it brings up videos in a random part of the video. So you can quickly click next, next, next through a data set and get a sense of what something is. And I find it so interesting that in cybersecurity, there are so many manual detection processes like these that we do everything we can to automate, right? If you're going to do something twice, you certainly need to automate it for the third time. There's no reason you should be doing it again. It's a waste of labor hours, especially in cyber where we have so few. And so the opportunity for that is gone. Like cybersecurity as a discipline and many of the things that I've learned how to do over the past like 15 years, that stuff is like obsolete at this point. And I would feel really weird to go, to some corporation and talk to them about doing things the old way when we're now going into a new world where we should be able to do more with less, especially with like AI. And I don't see adoption of Web3 yet, but I think that's coming because the efficiencies are there. And it is a security, like I tell people blockchain is a security product. I'm not sure why they don't believe me, but that's really
because the media does a terrible job of covering blockchain.
Yeah.
So they only see the negatives.
Yeah, it's really tough. It's really tough. I try to talk to my friends about this, folks in Web 2. But over time, I found myself pulling farther and farther away from them because I just can't keep doing things the old way. If there's a newer, better way to do it, there's a more efficient way to do something. I just don't know why we would continue doing it the old way unless the benefit is to get consulting dollars, right? Like I understand that, but it's not really motivating for me personally to be in it just for the sake of making consulting dollars. There has to be something interesting and valuable and relevant that I'm bringing to the table. So
what makes sense? What was I mean, I have two main questions from like this wild background that you just described, right?
Incredibly wild.
No, it's
I want to dive into it, but I was like, we gotta.
Well, Nick was also in the military, so I'm sure there's conversations you guys can have about
we could probably nerd out about
and how he sort of got into tech stuff. But it's like given that background, which like on its own is wildly impressive, and we could just like finish out the podcast like talking about that and like digging into those experiences. But it's like I'm curious, what was the jump from that to Web3, right? And then separate from that, there's sort of this jump into art, right? Which is sort of like how we found you, right? Was like through art and drip and that kind of stuff. And so I'm left trying to connect the dots here and would love for you to help me out with that.
Okay. So it's weird for me too. Okay. It's weird because I've been a very single purpose like hacker. I'm just a cybersecurity person, right? And I say cybersecurity to be accessible. It's actually InfoSec. Okay. It's information security, and information security and hacking are actually two different things, right? Because hacking is the concept of I'm going to subvert a system, or I'm going to do something that I am not necessarily supposed to do, or that the developers of this thing didn't think about, right? They didn't consider it. And then there's a cybersecurity professional or information security professional whose job it is to protect usually an organization, because those are the people who can afford to pay us. Like not focusing on those things feels like a betrayal on everything that I've ever done, right? When I first started working on art, I just thought, how does this fit in with my identity? How does this fit in with like who I am? I just feel weird doing it. But I also wasn't sure why I was doing it. And I knew that it felt good. I knew that I'd spent 30 years telling people that I wasn't creative and that I had not a creative bone in my body, which is really embarrassing to think about now, because the truth is that I was just creatively blocked. So going through the experience of being on the Biden campaign in 2020 was like the most difficult job of my life. I was targeted. I was doxxed. I had people emailing the campaign trying to get me fired. And since then, it's been like really negative in a lot of ways, because people see my political opinions first, or they associate me with Joe Biden first, which has been kind of tough to go back into tech environments, because people are really sensitive to that. Even though they think they aren't political, they're actually sensitive to someone they consider to be a political actor in their environment. So thinking about all of this and just realizing that the world of corporate it was not necessarily aligned with the new person that I was after going through this kind of experience and being on the campaign and thinking like, I want my life to mean something. I want the work that I do to be valuable. I want my daughters, I have 3 daughters, to see what I do and to see my history and be like, wow, mom was badass. You know, mom did some cool stuff. Mom, you know, added some value to the world. I'm not really sure that the value that I can bring to the world requires me to spend my time focusing on a corporation's intellectual property and like, how do I protect that and secure it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So over time, I started writing more. I put up a blog. This was something else that I had also refused to do for many years. Couldn't keep a diary. Certainly wasn't writing about myself. And something just kind of unblocked. I started writing and was receiving really great feedback and started connecting with a lot of writers who I'd simply been a source for many years. I've talked to, I don't know, 100 journalists over the past 5 or 6 years. I was featured on the front page of the Washington Post with my original privacy research. So I got to know a lot of these writers and got a sense that what they work on is important and valuable, that there is something really interesting about creating narrative. And through all of that, I started making the art and I was collabing with Banana on some things, and I started making my own stuff and have been really focused on AI. And I came to realize that all of the work that I had done in tech previously and all the understanding that I have as a generalist would serve me really, really well in terms of making digital art, because the frontier of digital art right now is artificial intelligence, and the amount of technical knowledge that you need in order to get that up and running today is a lot. It's high, right? Most people think of DALL-E or, I don't know, think of any like Midjourney, any commercial AI application where you kind of type in a prompt and something beautiful comes out. And so with AI video, that's not really the thing. And I came to learn more about it through film school. I was in film school for like a semester and a half and learned a lot about how to write a story, how to tell a story, how to act, how to do sound, how to run a camera, you know, like everything that you have to do in order to put together a production. In those couple of semesters, I was able to pick up quite a bit. I created a short film, a few short films, and I got to realizing that visual content is very powerful. Visual storytelling is very powerful. So being able to write a story for my blog and to convey a very technical story in a way that is like science communication that gets through to you know, quote unquote normies, that serves you really well when you're working in film and you're writing scripts and you're thinking about how do I message what it is that I'm about. And I found all of that to be incredibly valuable, because as a technical person in the world of cybersecurity, the most that I had thought in the past about narrative was like, I'm writing a report. I'm writing a very long report, and I'm going to make sure that I visually structure this report in a way that is going to be the most understandable, the most accessible to the audience. So either the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, or whoever the security leads are at the organization that hired me. So being able to shift to writing for a blog, having people pay me on that blog where they send me money where, you know, they don't have to, everything on there is free. I don't paywall anything. And then I was approached by Vibu. And I get approached by a lot of people on a regular basis for all kinds of things. Like, you wouldn't believe some of the weird stuff that comes up. And I have to get really good at evaluating these things and doing so quickly, and eliminating time wasters and saying, okay, this isn't for me, but maybe I can connect you to someone that I know. But when he reached out to me, it was just kind of the opportunity, or the promise was, you have a place to put your things. You want to create beautiful things, and we have a place for it. And there are people who are interested in it. And that value proposition was pretty much irresistible. So the idea is that I don't have to do any marketing. You know, I hate marketing. I have a really hard time with selling myself as a person. This was also a reason why it was really difficult to be in cybersecurity at a director level, because you're suddenly selling. You're selling a lot of services, and you're sometimes in the room with people who who don't even really understand why they need what you're selling. And because the services that I was selling were so technical, it felt like if they didn't really know that they wanted it, then maybe I was in the wrong room. If I had to explain why security was important, I was potentially in the wrong room with the wrong people. So getting in the right rooms with the right people is super valuable. And that's been my experience with Drip. Just really, really happy about it. So yeah, a very technical person who decided over time that she was going to expand herself creatively, and now she does more creative things and is interested in them and speaks of herself in the third person.
I mean, who doesn't from time to time?
Is the majority of your artistic work then like digital video? Then you sort of mentioned that as requiring a lot of like technical knowledge. Is it
Yes.
kind of like AI generated video? Is that the primary?
I've done a lot of different things. I started by taking, I've done images. I've done a lot of illustrations, but I like to animate them. And so I've used like all different types of software, from VFX software, all different types of VFX software to make changes to things, to highlight a part of an image. But the place where I'm at now is a little different. What I'm doing now is working with Stable Diffusion. And I actually just got Stable Diffusion 3. It was just released like 3 or 4 days ago, so I'm excited to try it out. But Stable Diffusion is fascinating because there's this big open source ecosystem full of tooling. And like, if you're not technical, you're not going to be able to figure that out. You're just not. If you can't make changes to a Python script, like, and get a sense of what the script is doing, then like it's potentially not for you. There's the Comfy UI ecosystem. Are you guys familiar with that?
No.
Yeah. So unless you're working in AI, you wouldn't. But it's a node-based kind of workflow tool.
Okay.
And when I'm generating AI video, I'm using a custom model. I'm using motion modules. I'm using LoRa's, which affect the final image. There are many different pieces that go into creating a functional workflow that allows me to spit out some of the pieces that I've been creating lately. But the amount of experimentation that goes into that is insane. Like the amount of labor hours that just go into my machine isn't working. Like I have a very vanilla machine, like an RTX 4070. There are a lot of things that just don't work right out of the box. And the box is like often very janky and held together with duct tape. So, yeah.
It's like the classic Linux experience though.
Yeah.
Everything's held. Like I run Linux on both of my laptops, and I have like a desktop that I never use. It's also running it. And it's like, everything's held together with duct tape and bubble gum.
Yep.
My camera, like drivers are always weird, especially if you like do any like dual booting. And it's like,
yes.
Oh.
Yes. I mean, I like a lot of the hardware issues with Linux have been resolved. Honestly, when you install
NVIDIA drivers are just trash everywhere, though. On every distro of Linux, you're just like,
yes. I had so many problems that I actually had to switch my my system over to Windows, and I've actually found it to be quite functional because of the NVIDIA driver integration and the fact that like .NET, right? There are some pieces there that make all of that work together really well. That like in Linux, if you don't have every version, like like if you have like a pippy package that's the wrong version, nothing's working, and you also won't get a sane error message for anything. So again, if you don't know how to troubleshoot things, you will end up in
true statement.
Yeah, you end up in a weird situation. But for people who don't want to configure all of that, I encourage you to go check out rundiffusion.com. Really cool website, not super expensive, and they pre-configure a lot of these workflows for you, so you can get up and running a lot faster than, say, doing it all at home locally, which again takes many labor hours.
Nice.
Yeah, but lots of video content.
This is, I'm not gonna lie, like none of this conversation was what I was expecting out of like, hey, let's talk about like Web3 art, right? And then it turns out to be like
full rabbit hole.
So highly technical. Like I think many of our listeners even will have like eyes glazed over in the last 30 seconds when you guys were talking hardware.
Sorry.
Oh no, it's like in a good way.
It's
in a good way. Sure. Like we get in the weeds often, but I don't think anyone was expecting that when they're thinking like art, right?
Oh, yeah.
Which I think so like this is fascinating to me, right? Like I genuinely mean that in the best way. I'm so curious, like from a personality perspective, right? Like something drew you to both of these worlds that are seemingly different, but there's something similar about them, right? Like sort of the infosec side of things, the Web3 and the art. There's some common thread there for you, and I'm curious if you've thought about that at all, about like what is the common thread between these things that is so appealing to me, even though to other people they look like two totally different worlds.
I'm pushing the boundaries and I'm doing things that other people aren't doing. And that's satisfying enough for me. When people like get a copy of my artwork and they look at it and they go, how did she make that? I live for that. I love that. Right. It's almost like being a magician, a really, really good magician who just completely takes over the stage, and you don't really know how they did what they did. And you're just kind of like, and a lot of my stuff, I think, I kind of worry about it sometimes because I feel like the labor hours that go into the work that I'm doing are not reflected in the finished product, because it might look similar to something else that you've seen before. But the way it was made was completely revolutionary compared to what you have seen before, right? Before, we're looking at 3D software. We're looking at a large team of people who have to work really, really hard to create a scene, to create imagery. And now we're in a place where there are unlimited options that are coming up for how to create imagery and how to manipulate the scene in order to reflect what it is that you want it to show. Like today, we're looking at OpenAI Sora, right? People are using products out there that are commercial products that have all of the bits and pieces that I work with on a regular basis completely abstracted. So you'll have an AI company sell you an app that will take a video as input, your video as input, and then transform that into an AI copy of the same video. But what you're losing is the ability to do anything other than select a template. You're clicking on a template that another artist inside that company configured for that user, right? It's similar to a project that Banana and I did a few years ago that was called Mural Neural Dreams. And what was cool about this was Stable Diffusion was new, and we figured out how to use the API on the GUI tool in order to have people mint from our house. So people would like log into our server. They would go to like muralneuraldreams.com. They would click mint, and actually a request is being sent through our API. And that template that I pre-configured that says, I want you to generate me a woman on a wall. She's on a mural outside, right? That was so successful. We minted out. I think there were 200 that were minted as a part of that project. And people were so excited to find out that when they were clicking mint, they were generating not something that was popping out of a candy machine, but a brand new thing that had never existed before and that would not exist had they not clicked the mint button.
That's cool. Yeah, I think with the idea of like the templatized services that exist out there, it's people lose the creativity. And completely. It's like I can see it in your face as you're talking about it. Yeah. Like you are so inspired by that creativity, by the process. And like, yes. Yeah, you're spending a lot of time and a lot of hours on like tinkering with it and like adjusting different settings and like getting it to exactly what you want. But like, that's part of the love of the creativity, the creative process, and like going through all these things, especially as a technical person, like that resonates hard.
I didn't start there. I think it's important for people to hear that I started with very basic tools. I didn't know how to use like Procreate. I didn't know how to really use an Apple Pencil. You know, now I work with, I've got a Wacom, which I love very much. But I used very, very basic tools. I didn't know how to do anything. I didn't know how to use a video editor, right? And where I am today is like leaps and bounds ahead of where I was when I started. And it didn't really take that much, right? It was just, I'm on drip, and every week I need to come up with pieces. I need to make something. And my standard for myself, like my bar is pretty high. Like I don't like delivering crap to anybody. Like the idea that I would send like something that looks like spam to 100,000 wallets, that's just not possible. It's not doable. Like I don't want to get spam in my wallet. I'm disgusted when I get it. I only want valuable things in my wallet. That's what a wallet is for, storing valuable things and receiving valuable things. So I want every single thing that I send out for it to be something that the recipient looks at and says, wow, I haven't seen that on Solana. I haven't seen that elsewhere in my life. And I think it's good. And if people are telling me that my work is good, that's a very simple reinforcement psychologically to continue. And so when you're on Drip and you're receiving this feedback every week, you're getting messages on Telegram every week, every day from people who are sending you droplets and like dropping a message to you in that same transaction and encouraging you and telling you that I really like your work. You're doing a great job. Keep going. That is not the type of community or reception that I can obtain anywhere else, right? It doesn't matter that I'm a cybersecurity professional. It doesn't matter that I've had titles and I've done jobs and what, people know me, whatever. Like none of that really helps the art. The art is much more pure than that. The art is not about a cult of personality. The art is not, Jackie standing in front of the art going, pay attention to the art because Jackie made it, right? Like the art stands on its own. And when people show up to the site, they show up to Drip, they're making a conscious choice to pick up things that are valuable to them. And every time they make a choice to send me droplets, to pick up one of my artworks and to subscribe, whatever, all of those actions are encouraging feedback, psychological loops, right? Mechanisms that keep the artist feeling like there's a reason for them to continue making the art. So I've just found that really valuable. I think without that, you're more at the mercy of your own individual typology. Like how often do you want to make something? When do you feel compelled to make something? A lot of people don't really feel compelled to make. They're making something because it's a financial thing for them, and I think that's totally fine. I don't see anything wrong with that whatsoever. Like commercial art is great. People who focus on selling their art, that's great too. I think there's room for all different types of artists. But as for me, I'm just so hands off and laissez-faire, and I just want it to be out there. And if people think it's good, I'll see a reception. And I think that on Drip, I have seen a fairly sizable reception. It's been really wonderful so far since December 30th of last year, 2023, when I did my first drop.
What is like your process? Kind of a cliche question, I know, but it's just like, how do you go from, all right, I want to create something, to figuring out what it is you want to create and actually having it done? Is it experimentation all the way, and then you only know what the subject matter is at the end? Is it starting from the beginning with like, I want to create X, and then you're trying to build that? Like how do you go about doing it?
So when you're creating with AI, it's a process of co-creation, and the modules and pieces and models that you're using in order to engage in that process of co-creation, they all affect the finished product. So if I say I want graffiti on a brick wall, I may want to just put that in the prompt. I may want to get a specialized model that has a lot of graffiti art already in it. I may want to train my own. I may want to create a LoRa or use a LoRa. Like there are 5 or 6 different ways that I can use, and those have varying effects. And without knowing what the particular combination is of all the code that you're using, you don't actually know what that output is going to look like. And you can't really start iterating on a concept until you have a sense that your work looks the way that you want it to. So for example, I did a drop for Pith. The drop for Pith was amazing. I'm not sure if you guys got to see that. It was as a glass being. If you go over to Drip House, Drip.
Yeah, I remember seeing
house
it. It was really cool.
Pith. Just really amazing. I want to be able to animate that. Do you know how amazing it would be to animate a creature made of glass? Like these are capabilities that would really require an expensive team in Hollywood to make, right? It's just not the kind of quality that you can very easily come up with in the 3D world. And so to think that a lone actor, someone like me, who is at home with one single video card, could potentially get to the point where she's able to fully animate these people, to use, for example, ControlNet. ControlNet allows you to move pose a person, right? So like if I am starting with a video where somebody does this, then I want to be able to map where all of their fingers are, and to be able to ask the AI to fill in and turn that into something else. I mean, there are 10 different techniques that I can think of off the top of my head for how to produce a finished product with AI. And all of the things that I have up on Drip were all produced with combinations of different software. So no, there's no one workflow. Every workflow is different, unfortunately, because I get really bored of the same thing and have a hard time wanting to release something that looks boring or like it's been done before or that isn't intellectually stimulating for me. And I love hot women, so I tend to go heavy on the booba, honestly. But yeah, I don't always have a sense of what I'm making. I start with a very rough idea, and then I build workflow until the workflow outputs something around the ballpark of what I'd like, and then I work on refining that as much as possible. Sometimes I get to the end of a workflow, and then I have to change the AI model that I'm using, which takes me back all the way to square one. So I would love to one day like film myself and do a real process video, but it's so weirdly haphazard that I kind of feel weird doing it. But yeah, but again, I don't really get a sense.
I would love to see that.
Yeah, that'd be really cool, actually.
I don't get a sense that people understand what it is that I'm doing, and I just keep trying to tell them, like, guys, this is some cutting edge shit. Okay. Do you understand that, nobody is doing that? Like Trey Parker and Matt Stone from South Park Studios created a new studio just to work with like Stable Diffusion and some of these products. Like
cool.
It's so brand new. And I know for a fact that this stuff is going to take over Hollywood, that the stuff that we're seeing with OpenAI, Sora, and these other models today, that produce maybe like a 5-second clip of something that looks really weird, I don't think that's going to be the case for long. Like what I'm making today, in 5 to 10 years, we'll see a packaged capability there to create AI video, like text to video, in a form that is pleasing and not ugly to people, and that isn't constantly shifting or turning into something else or having 8 fingers, right? Like all of those things. Yeah.
We're going to have the OpenAI website. You go to chat.openai.com, and you're just like, give me this video, and then it's going to come out and it's going to look pretty solid, and be like, wow, that was really cool.
Yeah.
And then there's going to be like the next explosion of like interest in AI, because it becomes far more accessible to the people that aren't going through the hours and hours of experimentation to get their rig set up. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, that brings me back to a point from earlier. When I was using all these basic tools, what was happening was I was growing out of them. So I encourage people who think like, oh, this stuff might be really complicated to you now, but if you start really basic and you just keep at it and just like look up YouTube tutorials for how to do things, because the YouTubers are amazing. They have so many toots and all the resources are there. Over time, it builds on itself. So it's just like if you were to like go to a coding boot camp or something, like just kind of put together a curriculum for yourself, a very basic curriculum. I'm going to learn how to use, for example, A1111, which is a particular GUI. You can use Web UI Forge, which is a fork of A1111, which is way better. Or I'm going to start with Run Diffusion, and I'm not going to worry about configuring anything at all. I'm not going to install this on my own machine. I'm just going to use the tools that other people put together. And then I'm going to find out where my creative process rubs up against that. Because you're going to reach a point where you outgrow that tool set and it's going to feel stifling. Like I went through a bunch of different video editors. Like I started with Adobe, I don't know. It's like Adobe Premiere, or something really, really basic on iPad, and it has no capability. But you don't find that out until you've reached the end of the feature set. And then you're like, oh, but I actually want to do this thing in the edit, but I can't do it because the tool won't let me. And then you're forcibly learning new things. So video editors. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Learning through iteration. That's what all of this has been. And it's actually fascinating to me because the other day I picked up a pencil, like an old school pencil. I was going to like do a sketch or something. And I came to realize that my pen control, so analog, but like my pen control is amazing. I was like, how is it that my pen control is so good? And it's literally just because I've been using the Wacom. I've been using the Bamboo tablet. And it translates over into the real world. So I'm making all of these things digitally. I have no real experience making physical things, right? I can handle a physical camera and stuff like that, but and create my own input footage for some of my artwork. But it's generally not what I'm doing. I'm going all digital, and then I'm finding that the capabilities and the skills are translating out into the real world, and they mean something in the physical analog world, which is weird.
That's so cool. Nick and I were just talking about this last week, that like I think one of our goals with this show is to like encourage builders and then provide resources and support however we can. So I feel like everything you've talked about today kind of like really fits the mark, where it's just like you've been so encouraging, right? About like, hey, you don't have it, like it doesn't have to be overwhelming. You can start simple. You can, just like build up from there. So I think that's awesome. I think everyone I've ever spoken to who I felt like, wow, they've done some really impressive shit. It's like they all started with relatively small things and they just kept at it. Yeah. And it just compounds.
Yeah. Well, when it feels good, it's easy to do. When I'm able to like produce a new technical feat every week, like, holy cow, I just made these like glass sculptures. How did I make these glass sculptures? You can't make them in Midjourney. And you certainly wouldn't be able to make 3 completely different figures in the same kind of style using Midjourney. And so people are like, how is she doing that? It's just super, super gratifying, because then I can move on to like the next demo. And to a certain extent, because I'm working with bleeding edge tech, where I have to be on Hugging Face or Weights and Biases like like regularly in order to do the job. That's a website. Sorry.
I'm familiar with Hugging Face.
Yeah, I know.
Huggingface.com, I think it is.
Yeah. Weights and Biases as well as another website for training models and stuff like that. But I found that if I'm not on there on a regular basis, I'm really not using the latest stuff. And the time that it's taken me to reach these tools has shortened over time. So initially it was, okay, this code came out 6 months ago and I just found it. And now it's, that code came out last week and I just found it, right? So like the time is shortening. I'm able to find things that are relevant sooner, but I'm also at the mercy of the ecosystem. Not being a developer means that I'm more interested in what I can do with the tools than building the tools themselves, which means I just have to wait for people to get their stuff together. So if there's a bug and I'm not qualified to like enter in a PR, like I just have to wait. I can complain about it, but I have to wait. And everything is a rough tool. Everything is a rough tool created by some academic somewhere, or somebody working at like Stability or one of these private AI companies. And so I've become quite a fangirl of a lot of the work that is happening in the ML space. I just find it absolutely fascinating. And you can start combining these things. It's not just like I'm creating an AI image, but like there's AI video, there's AI sound, right? So I've created songs that are purely AI.
That's cool.
I can also do things like record Foley sounds in real life. Foley refers to like sound effects in film and movies. So if you're like hearing somebody walking and it's like a crunching sound, right? That would be something you would record in a studio, crunch, crunch, crunch. Or you can buy that MP3 from like a company that'll have like 500 of those sounds.
Side note for listeners, if you don't know this, all those sound effects, those Foley effects, none of them are the sound. None of them were created by the thing you think created them. Look it up on YouTube, and they're all just like the weirdest things, like crunching celery and like lettuce to like make footsteps. You'd be like, "What? This doesn't make sense." But it tricks our brain. It's wildly fascinating. It's cool.
Yes, absolutely. And going through film school, I just found it really fascinating to create these sounds, to layer them on top of MP3 tracks, on top of audio tracks, and like creating pieces that have atmospheric sound or something that isn't super coherent in the form of a complete song, something that uses a snippet of a song, lyrics from a song in order to convey a point. I don't know. I feel like the tool set that we have and all of these commercial products that are out there, as well as the more complex open source tooling that I can install and run locally, it provides an unlimited tool set, and we're at the infancy of that tool set. So that's what wakes me up every day. It feels very much like when I got into the world of hacking and cybersecurity. It was just kind of like, this is the coolest thing ever. There is a lot of, you can go as deep as you want, or you can stay as shallow as you want. And there's kind of an unlimited future space for where this is going to go. And it's really open. So very exciting and very similar to what's happening in Web3, right? Like we're in world Web 2.5 right now. And I think over time we will see the promise of Web3. There are a lot of folks in Web2 who poo-poo it. They say, oh, Web2 was just a fad. NFTs were a fad. Blockchain's dead. And I'm like, guys, Bitcoin at all-time high. I have no idea why you're saying that. I have no idea why Bitcoin at all-time high would prompt you to say it's all a scam. But I think with every successive cycle, right, every like bull, we're breaking down more and more people because they're getting interested and there's a use case that calls out to them. And so, Drip's very understandable. Drip's very,
it's very relatable.
It's intuitive. Yeah, it's intuitive. I'm holding back. I wanted to do a collaboration with a particular music artist who's very well known in the world of Web 2. But the kind of the standard that I have and the perfectionism that I have with releasing work that I think is good has held me back from sending something in. So I'm just going to try to work on it tonight. But I made this really amazing image of this man with like lightning, with lightning bolts and sparks coming out of his hands. And I have to use a very particular tool in order to do that. I have to use a motion LoRa to do that, and to chain it into the workflow is a huge hassle, and to get it to produce the sparks and the explosions the way you want to is a huge hassle. So again, lots of iteration. Don't always know what my finished product is going to be. I actually never know what my finished product is going to be, and always looking for ways to add more AI, to add more VFX, to combine all of the different technical capabilities in my disposal to produce something that's greater than the sum of its parts. So you can never just be like, oh, this is something that got spat out from Midjourney, or this is something that got spat out from somewhere. No, like people in Web 2, on the Twitter side, for example, this last week, they've really been complaining about the lack of story in some of the AI video and some of the demonstrations that people are making. But I think what they're not realizing is that Web 2 artists haven't caught up to this yet. They don't have the capabilities yet. They haven't caught up to it yet. And once they do, it'll be very much like when Photoshop came out. And my understanding was when Photoshop came out, they were saying, well, photography is done, guys. Like there's no more, who's going to take photograph? Like this doesn't even make sense. They couldn't wrap their heads around it. And realistically, it's just a tool set. It's just a new tool set. It gives you greater capabilities, and not everyone needs to use the same tool set. Like people use oil paints and some people use watercolors, and both are entirely valid. And sometimes you might even want to combine those. It's all up to the person who's using them. So hopefully over time, we'll see less hostility to both AI and crypto as people see these capabilities improve their lives in concrete ways. Right. Yeah. But we need to see more adoption for that.
Yeah, totally. Beautifully said.
Thank you.
And a great way to wrap up the episode. Like we're getting pretty close to time here. So that's some great final thoughts and phrasing around it.
Good.
Yeah, this has been amazing.
Thank you so much for having me.
Your background is so cool.
Thank you.
And immensely impressive. As James is dying over here on video.
But you were in the Navy, right, Nick?
Black lung over here.
Yeah, 10 years on submarines.
Oh, you were a nuke?
Yeah.
So you trained in like you trained like NAS Pensacola?
No, I didn't do Pensacola. Is Groton, Connecticut.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
I've been to NAS though. It's like, it's all right.
Yeah, it's all right. It's all right. Yeah, I lived there, and I used to fly in and out, and there would always be like a couple of nukes on the plane. And I'm like, yeah. You guys are pretty identifiable, compared to like regular civilians walking around. Yeah. But thank you for your service.
Yeah, thank you for yours.
Yeah, I know it's weird to say it, but I've been out for a while and I've warmed up to it. When I first got out, I was just kind of like scoffing. Like, don't thank me.
Still scoff at it a little bit.
You just got out though, Nick.
Yeah, I've been out
fresh.
year and a half now.
A year and oh my gosh,
yeah.
Congratulations. You're still like mentally getting out of it.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, we'll talk more later.
He's definitely still mentally getting out of it. Nick, there are some quirks in your behavior that I call out regularly. Let's be real.
That's true. I'm also a quirky guy.
When I got out of the military, I actually was like going back on base for like a week afterward. And it was to the point where like my first sergeant was like, you need to leave. Like, you can't be here anymore. I didn't know what to do with myself. You know, like you're in a community with people who you're with every day. They become like your family. They are your family for all intents and purposes. A lot of people aren't going home to a family after. They're going back to like the barracks. Navy barracks being way nicer than Army barracks, of course.
It's true statement.
But yeah, it's like your family. And so it becomes really disorienting and weird when you get out. And so for me, the first impulse was, okay, I left Iraq. I'm going to go back to Iraq. It feels comfortable there.
Yep.
It happens a lot, actually.
Yeah, it does.
I know quite a few people who are military to military contractor. It's just, it makes sense.
The pipeline. Yeah. Take your security clearance and go make a few more bucks. And yeah. So it's not so much like, thank you for your service, but it's a different type of service. And I thought it was good. But when you bring it back to the regular folk, they're like, ugh. What were you doing out there? I'm like, I was legal and everything was safe and legit. Like, I promise, I don't know how to convey that to people. But yeah, I have a weird background, so I appreciate you guys like letting me talk about it and pontificate and like encourage people to do stuff with tech, because why not?
Thank you so much for sharing it. It was like you say weird, I say like mind-blowingly cool.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm so glad
people that have the abnormal path always have a better story to tell.
I have so many stories. Like if we ever meet up, I'll regale you over beers.
Going to Singapore? You going to Singapore for Breakpoint?
I'm not. I thought about it.
Next time
I'm in Puerto Rico. I'm in Puerto Rico. Do you guys know how far that is?
Puerto Rico. Okay. I lived in the Dominican Republic for a couple of years.
You did? I'm half Dominican.
Yeah.
So, mom is Dominican also.
Okay.
So that's the reason why we ended up down here. Yeah.
In Puerto Rico. That's way cool. I love
that. We wanted the kids to learn to speak Spanish, and like it's hard to do up in the States because we speak English at home. Yeah. Yes. So they're around people who speak Spanish. And my Spanish is much better. Yeah. I'm fluent, but it's way better now. And you should ask Banana to speak Spanish when you get a chance, like to tease him.
Next time I see him.
Yeah, tease him. Because like he understands everything. He grew up understanding everything, but he wasn't speaking it in his household growing up. His dad didn't want him to speak it because he didn't speak it. So
that's funny.
Yeah, I don't speak Spanish very well anymore.
No?
It's been like 14 years since I was in the Dominican Republic.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so it was a long time ago.
14 years. You're not even that old.
I'm 34.
No, you're not.
Yeah. I have 3 kids. My oldest kid is 10.
No way.
Yeah. I'm older than you think. Apparently.
You're a bona fide grown up. Yeah.
But yeah. I mean, I pretend, but I have to pretend because I got kids depending on me. But
that's good stuff. Oh, happy Father's Day. Happy belated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hope it was chill. You too, Nick? You've got kids too?
Yeah, just the one. She's almost 4. We went camping. It was great.
Yay.
I love that. Camping for Father's Day?
Yeah, we did.
Nice.
We just happened to go camping, and it just happened to be Father's Day. The two didn't like line up or anything. We're just like, here's a free weekend. Let's go camping.
Nice.
Like in Connecticut?
Yeah.
Like RV type camping or like
tents on the ground, like professionals.
Oh yeah, the real stuff.
Like
not camping in an RV. That's not camping.
The fake camping, is that?
Glamping.
It's like glamping to the extreme.
Nick is gatekeeping camping.
Well,
everybody.
If you guys ever want to come down to Puerto Rico, just let us know. We'd be happy to have you.
I would love to. My sister was there for like 7 years, but she's 15 years older than me, so I was still kind of a kid and never made it down there. So I've never been. I would love to go. If I'm ever around, I'll let you know.
We should do an event. If you guys ever want to throw an event in PR, definitely let me know. I would love to do something, and I love running events.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah, let me know.
Well, Jeffy, it was great to meet you.
You too.
I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely great to meet you.
We'll probably have cut the show before this, but in case we haven't, to all the listeners, thanks for being here, and we'll see you guys next time.
Bye-bye.